A mass stabbing attack causes chaos on a train to London.
North of London, after a suspect went on a horrific stabbing attack in this crime spree on board a train.
The United Kingdom erupted after a string of brutal train stabbings shook the nation. A single message from a group of veterans triggered something no one in government saw coming. Within hours, 120,000 protesters were in the streets, roads blocked, stations shut down, police overwhelmed. But here's what no one is talking about. Why did the veterans take the lead? How did the crowd grow this fast? And what happened moments before officials ordered their convoys to turn back? And then something unthinkable. A minister's car tried to enter the government district. It didn't make it. What happened next sent shockwaves across the UK. Tonight, the country is on edge, and the images emerging from the ground are raising even more questions. What sparked the eruption? Who's really directing this movement? And what message did the government accidentally send when they turned away from their own people? Let's start where all of this began, in a carriage that should have been forgettable.
Suspected of stabbing multiple people on a train to London over the weekend, has been charged with 10 counts of attempted murder this morning.
The train that broke the nerve. It started like any other journey. The late afternoon service. People in office clothes, school uniforms, high-vis jackets, headphones and hoodies. Somebody reading a paperback. Someone else tapping out a last email. A child half asleep against a parent's shoulder. Then the mood shifted. Witnesses talk about a shout, a scuffle, the sound of metal against metal. Two men moving down the aisle with knives in their hands and panic in their eyes, lashing out in a space where there was nowhere to run. In a carriage barely wide enough for two people to pass, the options were limited. Passengers scrambled over seats, some shoved others behind them, someone slammed the emergency alarm, someone else dialed 999 with trembling fingers as the train began to slow. When it finally lurched to a halt, the floor was scattered with bags, phones and blood. Platform staff ran on. The first police officers arrived within minutes. Paramedics followed, turning the carriage into an improvised treatment bay. They did what they could. For one passenger, it wasn't enough. By evening, two suspects were in custody.
So he come up to me, he got up close and then he pulled his sword out and he says, "Do you want to die?" He repeated it.
Police briefed the media carefully. They said they were keeping an open mind on motive. Early on, they indicated that at that stage, the incident was not being treated as terrorism. There were hints about previous incidents, possible mental health issues, links to crime.
Two men were brought into police custody, where they remain this morning. I can tell you that these are the first male, a 32-year-old male, a black British national, and a 35-year-old man, a British national of Caribbean descent. They were both arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. Both were born in the United Kingdom.
But outside those press conferences, the message people heard was simpler and far more brutal. We don't know why this happened. We can't promise it won't happen again. On social media, the pattern was immediate. How does this keep happening? What are we paying taxes for if we're not safe on a train? That could have been my kids! Online, the anger had nowhere to go. In homes, the fear did what fear always does. It pooled, it fermented, it waited. And then, from a very different corner of British life, another voice cut through the static. When the veterans spoke up. While the news channels looped the same footage and politicians argued over talking points, another conversation was unfolding in quieter spaces. Veterans group chats, WhatsApp threads, Facebook groups, late-night phone calls between old friends who had once shared trenches and patrol bases.
250 veterans who gathered at the Cenotaph before descending on Westminster Square, flanked by a procession of motorbikes.
For years, years, many British veterans have felt they live in two worlds. On the one hand, they're applauded on Remembrance Sunday. They're name-checked in speeches. They're thanked on social media by politicians in poppies. On the other hand, when it comes to everyday security at home, they watch the same news as everyone else. Knife crime statistics, budget cuts, rail disruptions, a sense that the country is drifting from one crisis to the next. The train stabbings were, for some of them, a line. One of those veterans, we'll call him Mark, sat in a small flat with regimental photos on the wall and medals in a frame. He propped his phone against a mug, hit record, and spoke. No studio lights, no teleprompter, just a man in his 40s looking straight into the camera. "We signed up to keep people safe," he began. "We went where we were sent. Some of us didn't come back. Now you've got people scared to take a train home from work." His voice stayed level, but something harder sat just underneath. "I'm not here to feed anyone's hate," he said. "I'm not here to blame an entire community for what two men did. I am here to say this. It isn't good enough. Next Saturday, we march. Not as a mob, not as a party. As veterans, as families, as citizens, we march for safety, for accountability, and for every person who thinks that could have been me on that carriage. No more politics as usual. Protect our streets." He pressed upload. At first, the video travelled in predictable circles, his old unit, a regimental association, a charity page. Then someone clipped a 20-second segment and threw it onto TikTok. That was the ignition point. Comments flooded in. Finally, someone I actually trust. If the vets are leading, I'm there. I don't care left or right anymore. I care if my kids get home alive. A call that was meant for a few thousand people had suddenly reached millions. And that call was about to become something the country couldn't ignore. From a video to 120,000 feet on the ground. Once the veterans' message left their own circles, it took on a life of its own. Veterans associations reposted the call. Victim support groups shared it with their members. Commuter pages took it up. Influencers added their own commentary. Family members tagged each other. What started as "let's show up and make ourselves heard" turned quickly into something closer to a national mobilisation. Coaches were booked from Manchester, Birmingham, Cardiff, Glasgow. Social feeds filled with people arranging lifts, sharing maps, asking where to meet. Small businesses printed banners at cost or for free. "Safe streets now. Never again on our trains. Fix the system, not just the headlines." Families of knife crime victims contacted the organisers asking to carry photos of their loved ones. Nurses who had treated stabbing victims in A&Es planned to attend straight from night shifts. Students printed homemade signs between lectures. By midweek, police planners were quietly updating their estimates. Organisers began talking about 120,000 people. Police spokespeople preferred phrases like tens of thousands. Different news outlets chose the number that best suited their framing. Whatever the true figure, anyone looking at the drone footage on the day saw the same thing.
Billed as a show of patriotic unity, descended into violence as protesters clashed with police and counter-demonstrators, leaving at least 26 officers injured and at least 24 people under arrest. The march drew an estimated 150,000 participants.
This was not a niche demonstration. This was a broad slice of an anxious country. And at the very front of that slice, visible from the air as a distinct band of bodies moving in step, were the veterans who had lit the fuse. Veterans in front, a country behind. On the morning of the march, the air carried that particular mix you only get on days when something big is about to happen. Adrenaline, apprehension, and the sense that for a few hours the usual script might not apply. The veterans gathered first. Some arrived in full suits with medals on their chests. Others came in jeans and battered jackets with small regimental badges pinned near the heart. There were men in their 60s walking slowly with sticks and women in their 30s in immaculate berets. Different battalions, different branches. A common decision to stand at the front. Their banners set the tone. We fought for safety, not fear. Order without excuses. Protect our people. Behind them, the crowd thickened, parents pushing prams, office workers in lanyards, teenagers with marker pen posters, people in hijabs, in crosses, in no visible faith at all, survivors of previous attacks carrying framed photographs. The chants when they started were simple. Safe streets now, no more knives. Justice for victims. There were no party logos at the front. No leader's face on a stick, just ordinary people behind a phalanx of those who used to serve. On the fringes, something more volatile flickered. Smaller groups tried to bring their own agendas, angry slogans targeting entire communities, flags associated with past far-right marches, chants that had nothing to do with train safety or knife crime, and everything to do with old battles. They were met not by police first, but by veterans. Mark and others moved towards them. The exchange was calm but decisive. "Not today," one veteran told a man holding a racist banner. "You're not marching behind us with that. And this is about safety for everyone who uses those trains. You want to shout that, do it somewhere else." Some grumbled and moved away, others left. The message was clear. The authority on the street wasn't any one political group. It was the line of people in berets at the front who refused to let the march be hijacked. For a few hours, the anger in the air had shape. It had discipline. People were furious, but they were determined not to let that fury be turned into a pretext for more division. While all of that was unfolding at ground level, another version of the same day was appearing on screens that most marchers would never see. How Power watched the march. In a secure operations room miles away from the chants, the march was reduced to colours, numbers and moving shapes. One wall showed a map with blocks of red where mobile phones were densely clustered. Another wall cycled through CCTV feeds, a river of people crossing a bridge, a police line holding steady, a helicopter shot of a square filled edge to edge. In the back, monitors tracked keywords and sentiment online, line graphs twitching every time a new clip went viral or a fresh rumour spread. Police commanders and officials spoke in a jargon that made the raw emotion on the streets sound like an abstract problem. Crowd density increasing at Whitehall. Potential breakaway group forming near the station. Sentiment spiking negative after that minister clip. Monitor for escalation around the government quarter. They were not blind to the reasons people were marching. Many of them took the same trains, lived in the same cities, worried about their own families. But the picture they were working with was one of risk, not of grief. Among them were people with their own history in uniform. A junior analyst who had once worn the same beret, now visible at the front of the march, stared at the screen, listening to colleagues discuss dispersal options and containment. If they think this is dangerous, they muttered quietly, they should have seen what we saw overseas. No one responded. There was too much to monitor, too many phone calls from ministers wanting reassurances. The question from above was the same over and over. Can we control this? Out on the streets, a different question was forming. Will anyone in power actually listen? Those two questions were about to collide in one image.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I know everyone in this House wants to see knife crime eradicated. More today, I'm sure, than ever before. So I hope the House will also support the tough steps needed to eradicate knife crime, because we owe the victims of these appalling crimes actions as well as words.
Secretary.
Media versus street reality. Before we get to that moment, it's worth pausing to look at how the story was already being twisted before the day was even over. If you were watching from home, your understanding of the march depended heavily on where you got your information. One channel ran with the headline, "Veterans Lead Peaceful Mass March for Safe Streets." Another went with, "Fears of far-right surge as ex-military front anti-crime protest." On one set of bulletins, the drone shots of huge crowds were framed as a dignified outpouring of legitimate anger. On another, the same images were paired with words like volatile and menacing, even when nothing more dramatic than chanting was happening. On social media, the distortions multiplied. Old clips from previous protests were re-uploaded as if they were from that afternoon. A shaky video of a scuffle at the very edges of the march was shared as proof that the entire event was violent. A fake audio recording circulated purporting to show a minister calling veterans useful idiots. It was debunked hours later, but by then it had already been seen millions of times. In the comments, people who had been there tried to correct the record. I was in that crowd. It was families and vets. It wasn't what you're describing. Others replied with their own hand-picked evidence. Look at this clip. Looks like thugs to me. Two realities were forming side by side. The messy, complicated truth of what was happening in real time on the streets and the curated, edited versions that better fit existing narratives.
I put my hand on this chair, like just trying to push myself forward. And then I look at my hand and it's covered in blood. And then I look at the chair and there's blood all over the chair.
And then leaving the train, the conductor managed to open it. The other conductor got stabbed because he was trying to prevent more people getting stabbed.
Into that confusion stepped the moment that would define the day for many people. The moment power turned away. As the front of the march reached the government district, a rumour sliced through the noise. A minister's car was trying to get in. Nobody knew if it started with a radio, a text, or guesswork. In a crowd this dense, truth and rumour move at the same speed. Heads turned, phones went up. The veterans at the front kept their pace, but eyes swung toward a side street and a security gate. A short motorcade appeared, two black cars edging forward, aiming for the entrance that normally swallows ministers without fuss. The veterans didn't charge the vehicles or smash barriers. They held their line. But behind them, tens of thousands pressed toward the same narrow point, turning forward motion into a human surge. Chants bounced off the glass. Come speak to us! Who's in charge? No more excuses. From street level, it looked like a country demanding its leaders show their faces. From the control room, it looked like a security risk heading towards a red line. The order came quickly. The convoy stopped, reversed, then slipped away toward a back route and an underground entrance. From a security-first viewpoint, it was logical. From a symbolic one, it was disastrous.
At this moment, it's important to say, though, the police were expecting these so-called counter-protesters to come here, and they are allowed to be here. The police set this exclusion zone up for those taking part in the pro-Palestine march, and they did expect some level of...
Minutes later, the clip was everywhere. A black car backing away from a wall of banners and medals. The caption wrote itself, "Minister flees 120,000 veterans." There was no protocol, no context, just an image and a story, a power turning away from the people it claims to protect. When the chants fade, by early evening, the chants quieted. Voices turned to conversation, banners sagged in tired hands, and the river of protesters splintered into small streams heading for buses, trains, and back streets. Placards and bottles dotted the pavements. Slogans that had thundered now lay chalked on concrete, softened by the first signs of rain. On a train out of the city, a young woman from the attack service scrolled through clips of the march. Her arm was bandaged. The crowd on screen felt distant, like a memory already slipping. Across from her, a veteran rested his hands on a folded banner, watching his reflection blur in the train window. Today felt different, heavier. No clear battlefield, no uniforms to oppose, only the quiet weight of discontent. In homes across the country, families shared reactions. Some felt proud. We showed them we care. Others doubted. They'll say all the right words, then bury it in reports. Some wished they had gone. Others were glad they hadn't worried about how quickly crowds can turn. On screens, ministers thanked the peaceful majority, offered condolences, and announced reviews. Familiar phrases returned our balanced response. Public safety, civil liberties. But behind the words, many heard something else. We've heard you. That doesn't mean we'll act. In private, the veterans who had led the protest debated what came next. Some wanted to wait and watch. Others said pressure must not stop. All knew the day wasn't about them, but about the void they had stepped into, a vacuum left by broken trust. What this eruption really means. The stabbing was the spark, but beneath it were deeper wounds-rising knife crime, neglected youth services, strained police forces, and communities who feel simultaneously surveilled and unsafe. Politicians spoke of safety, yet lived behind layers of protection the public couldn't access. Into that space stepped veterans people many instinctively trust. Their call cut through noise, but it also carried risk. Veterans are not one block. And when citizens begin looking to uniforms over institutions for change, democracy enters dangerous terrain. The next crisis will raise the same questions. Who keeps us safe? Who do we trust? What will we do when the answers no longer satisfy? Tell us your thoughts and opinions in the comments. Now subscribe so you don't miss videos like this, and don't forget to like this video.